The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat at her kitchen table reviewing Charlotte's homework. Her 9-year-old daughter had been unusually quiet lately, her normally bright smile appearing less frequently. Catherine noticed how Charlotte would sometimes flinch when discussing family gatherings or become withdrawn after spending time at official royal events. "Mummy, do I have to go to Granny Camilla's tea party next week?" Charlotte asked softly, not looking up from her mathematics worksheet. Her small fingers gripped the pencil tightly, and Catherine could see the tension in her daughter's shoulders. "Of course, darling. It's a family tradition. Why wouldn't you want to go?" Catherine kept her voice gentle, though concern flickered across her features. Charlotte had always enjoyed these family gatherings before, often returning home with stories about the delicious cakes and Camilla's collection of antique teacups. Charlotte shrugged, still avoiding eye contact. "I just don't feel very well when I'm there anymore." Catherine set down the papers she was holding and moved closer to her daughter. Something was clearly troubling Charlotte, and, as a mother, Catherine's instincts were telling her this went beyond simple childhood reluctance. She had noticed changes in Charlotte's behavior over the past few months, particularly after interactions with Camilla, but had attributed them to the normal adjustments children make as they grow older and become more aware of their unique position in the world. "Can you tell me what makes you feel unwell, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, sitting down beside Charlotte and gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Charlotte finally looked up, her blue eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion and hurt that made Catherine's heart clench. "Sometimes Granny Camilla says things that make me feel small. Like when she told me my dress was too bright for a proper princess, or when she said I should speak more quietly because ladies don't raise their voices." "But, Mummy, I wasn't even speaking loudly. I was just excited about my art project." Catherine felt a spark of protective anger but kept her expression calm and encouraging. "What else has she said, Charlotte?" "Last week, she told me that my hair was messy and that I should learn to present myself better if I want people to respect me. But Sarah had just helped me brush it before we arrived. And when I tried to show her my drawing, she said perhaps I should focus on more practical skills instead of wasting time with silly pictures." Each revelation felt like a small dagger to Catherine's heart. She had always prided herself on raising her children to be confident, creative, and authentic, while still understanding their responsibilities. Hearing that someone was systematically undermining Charlotte's self-esteem was infuriating, especially when that someone held such an influential position in their family. "Has she said anything else, darling?" Catherine asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Charlotte nodded reluctantly. "She told me that I should watch how I eat because cameras are always watching, and that I giggle too much during church services. But, Mummy, Louis was making funny faces, and I was trying not to laugh out loud. I thought I was being good by keeping it quiet." Catherine pulled Charlotte into a gentle hug, feeling her daughter's small body relax against her. The picture that was emerging was deeply troubling. These weren't isolated incidents or well-meaning guidance from a grandmother figure. This was a pattern of criticism designed to make a confident, spirited child doubt herself. "You know that none of those things are true, don't you?" Catherine said softly. "You're creative, intelligent, and kind. Your laughter brings joy to everyone around you, and your art is beautiful. You dress perfectly for every occasion, and your hair always looks lovely." Charlotte pulled back slightly to look at her mother. "But Granny Camilla said that if I want to be a good princess someday, I need to learn these things now. Being a good princess means being true to yourself while serving others with kindness and respect. It doesn't mean changing who you are or dimming your light," Catherine replied firmly. "Has she said these things when Daddy or Grandpa King are around?" "No, it's always when we're alone, or when the grown-ups are talking about other things. Sometimes she says it with a smile, so I'm not sure if she's being mean or just trying to help me." Charlotte's confusion was evident in her voice. Catherine felt her anger building, but she channeled it into determination to protect her daughter. This was manipulation of the most insidious kind, using authority and a position of trust to gradually erode a child's confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. The fact that Camilla was careful to make these comments when others weren't paying attention showed calculated intent rather than genuine concern. "From now on, I want you to tell me immediately if anyone says something that makes you feel bad about yourself," Catherine said firmly. "You are perfect exactly as you are, and no one has the right to make you feel otherwise. Do you understand?" Charlotte nodded, and Catherine could see some of the tension leaving her daughter's face. But Catherine's mind was racing with implications and next steps. She needed to speak with William immediately, and they would need to address this situation carefully but decisively. No one, regardless of their position or title, would be allowed to psychologically abuse her child. That evening, after the children were in bed, Catherine sat in the study with William, sharing what Charlotte had revealed. She watched her husband's expression grow increasingly dark as she recounted each incident. "This has been going on for months?" William asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It appears so. And I suspect there have been other incidents that Charlotte hasn't mentioned yet. She's been so confused because Camilla presents it as guidance rather than criticism, and Charlotte doesn't want to be disrespectful to a family elder." William ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Catherine recognized as a sign of his deep frustration. "My father needs to know about this immediately. This behavior is completely unacceptable, and it ends now." "I'm also concerned about how this might affect Charlotte's relationship with your father," Catherine added. "She loves her grandfather, but if she associates these negative experiences with family gatherings where he's present, it could damage that bond as well." They talked late into the night, planning their approach carefully. This wasn't just a family matter, it had the potential to affect Charlotte's psychological development and her future relationship with her royal duties. More immediately, it was causing real harm to their daughter's self-esteem and sense of security within her own family. The next morning, Catherine found herself watching Charlotte more carefully as they prepared for school. She noticed small signs she had previously missed, the way Charlotte checked her appearance multiple times in the mirror, how she seemed hesitant to share her enthusiasm about school projects, and the subtle tension that appeared when royal events were mentioned. During the drive to school, Catherine made a decision. "Charlotte, I want you to know that what we discussed yesterday stays between us for now, but I also want you to remember something important. You never have to accept treatment that makes you feel bad about yourself, no matter who it comes from. If someone's words hurt you, trust your feelings and tell me or Daddy right away." "Even if it's someone important in the family?" Charlotte asked quietly. "Especially then," Catherine replied firmly. "The people who truly love you want you to feel confident and happy. Anyone who consistently makes you feel otherwise is not acting out of love, regardless of what they might claim." As she dropped Charlotte off at school and watched her daughter walk through the gates with a slightly straighter posture than she'd had in weeks, Catherine felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. Whatever the consequences, whatever difficult conversations lay ahead, she would not allow anyone to continue damaging her daughter's spirit. The confrontation that was coming would likely create significant family tension, but Catherine had no doubt about her priorities. Her children's well-being came first, always. As she drove back toward home, she began mentally preparing for the conversation with King Charles that could potentially reshape family dynamics but was absolutely necessary to protect Charlotte from further psychological harm. The morning of the planned confrontation arrived with typical British drizzle, matching Catherine's somber mood as she prepared for what would likely be one of the most difficult conversations of her royal life. William had arranged a private meeting with his father at Clarence House, ostensibly to discuss upcoming royal engagements, but both Catherine and William knew the real purpose was far more serious. Catherine spent extra time getting ready, choosing her outfit carefully, professional but not overly formal, respectful but confident. She needed King Charles to see her as both a concerned mother and a senior royal who would not be dismissed or patronized. The navy blue dress and pearl earrings struck the right balance of authority and approachability. As their car pulled up to Clarence House, Catherine felt her stomach tightening with nervous energy. She had faced hostile media, challenging public engagements, and intense scrutiny throughout her royal career, but this felt different. This was family, which made it both more personal and, potentially, more explosive. "Remember, we present a united front," William said quietly as they walked toward the entrance. "This isn't about attacking anyone. It's about protecting Charlotte and ensuring this behavior stops immediately." King Charles greeted them warmly in his private sitting room, surrounded by his beloved books and watercolor paintings. The familiar scent of his cologne and the afternoon light filtering through heavy curtains created an atmosphere of comfortable domesticity that made what they were about to discuss feel even more jarring. "This is a pleasant surprise," Charles said, settling into his favorite armchair. "Though I sense from your expressions that this isn't entirely a social visit." William and Catherine exchanged a look before William began. "Father, we need to discuss something quite serious regarding Charlotte and her interactions with Camilla." Catherine watched Charles's expression shift from pleasant curiosity to concern, then to something approaching defensiveness. What sort of interactions? Charlotte seems perfectly happy during our family gatherings. That's exactly the problem, Catherine interjected gently but firmly. Charlotte has been hiding her discomfort because she doesn't want to upset anyone, but she's been confiding in me about some very troubling comments Camilla has been making to her privately. Over the next 20 minutes, Catherine and William carefully detailed each incident Charlotte had reported, taking care to present the information objectively rather than accusatorily. They watched Charles's face grow increasingly troubled as the pattern of behavior became clear. Surely there's been some misunderstanding, Charles said when they finished. Camilla adores the children. She's simply trying to help Charlotte understand the expectations that come with her position. Father, a 9-year-old doesn't misunderstand being told her laughter is inappropriate or her dress is too bright, William replied with barely controlled frustration. These aren't helpful guidelines. They're systematic attempts to change Charlotte's personality to fit some narrow vision of what a princess should be. Catherine leaned forward slightly. Your Majesty, I've been very careful to verify these accounts with Charlotte multiple times. She's been consistent in her descriptions, and, more importantly, the change in her behavior over the past few months aligns perfectly with when these interactions began intensifying. What sort of behavioral changes? Charles asked, his tone becoming more serious. She's become self-conscious about her appearance, hesitant to share her enthusiasm for her interests, and anxious about family gatherings. Yesterday, she asked if she could skip Camilla's tea party because being there makes her feel unwell. This is a child who used to look forward to every family event. Charles was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the garden where he could see Camilla tending to her roses. Catherine could practically see the internal struggle playing out across his features, the tension between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his granddaughter. I find it very difficult to believe that Camilla would intentionally harm Charlotte, he said finally. We're not saying it's intentional, Catherine replied carefully. But impact matters more than intent when it comes to a child's psychological well-being. Whether Camilla realizes it or not, her words are causing real damage to Charlotte's self-esteem. William added, and the fact that she's careful to make these comments when others aren't paying attention suggests she knows they're inappropriate. Charles's expression darkened slightly at this implication. That's a very serious accusation. It's an observation based on Charlotte's consistent reports, Catherine said firmly. Every single incident occurred when you, William, or other family members were occupied with other conversations or activities. That's not coincidence. The conversation continued for another hour, with Charles alternating between defending Camilla and expressing genuine concern for Charlotte's well-being. Catherine could see him struggling with the implications of what they were telling him. Accepting that Camilla was psychologically harming Charlotte would require him to confront some very uncomfortable truths about his wife's character and motivations. What exactly are you asking me to do? Charles finally asked. We need this behavior to stop immediately, William said without hesitation. Charlotte should never again be subjected to criticism about her personality, appearance, or natural childhood behavior. She's 9 years old, not a royal aide in training. Catherine added, we also think it would be appropriate for Camilla to apologize to Charlotte, though that apology needs to be genuine and specific, not a general if I hurt your feelings statement. And if I speak with Camilla and she maintains that she was simply offering guidance? Then, we'll have a much larger problem, Catherine replied evenly. Because it would mean she either doesn't understand the impact of her words on a child, or she doesn't care. Either way, Charlotte's contact with her would need to be carefully supervised going forward. Charles looked genuinely pained at this prospect. Catherine understood his position. He was being asked to choose between his wife and his granddaughter, or at least to acknowledge that his wife had been behaving inappropriately toward a child he loved dearly. I need some time to process this and speak with Camilla privately, Charles said finally. Of course, William replied. But we want to be very clear that this situation needs to be resolved quickly. Charlotte's well-being is our absolute priority, and we won't allow her to continue being subjected to treatment that makes her question her worth. As they prepared to leave, Charles walked them to the door personally, an unusual gesture that suggested the gravity of the situation had truly sunk in. I want you both to know that Charlotte's happiness matters to me enormously. If what you're telling me is accurate, it will be addressed. Thank you, Catherine said sincerely. We know this is difficult, but Charlotte needs to know that her family will protect her from treatment that makes her feel diminished, regardless of who's responsible for that treatment. During the drive home, Catherine felt emotionally drained but cautiously optimistic. Charles had listened, even if he hadn't immediately accepted everything they'd told him. More importantly, he'd committed to addressing the situation, which was more than she'd dared hope for when they'd arrived.
"How do you think Camilla will react when he speaks with her?" Catherine asked William. "I honestly don't know."
If she's been doing this consciously, she'll probably deny it or claim she was misunderstood. If she genuinely doesn't realize the impact of her words, she might be defensive initially but, hopefully, willing to change her approach.
Catherine nodded, though privately she suspected the situation was more calculated than William wanted to believe.
The pattern of behavior Charlotte had described suggested someone who understood exactly what they were doing and was careful to avoid witnesses.
That evening, as she tucked Charlotte into bed, Catherine felt a renewed sense of determination.
Whatever happened next, Charlotte would know that her parents had fought for her and that her feelings mattered. The difficult conversation with Charles was just the beginning, but it was a crucial first step in ensuring Charlotte could grow up confident in her own worth, regardless of the complex pressures that came with her royal birth. 3 days passed before Catherine received the phone call she had been both anticipating and dreading. King Charles's voice sounded strained and weary when he asked if she and William could return to Clarence's house for an urgent family discussion. The tone suggested that his conversation with Camilla had not gone smoothly.
Catherine arrived to find the atmosphere markedly different from their previous visit.
Charles looked as though he hadn't slept well, and there was a tension in the air that spoke of recent conflict.
Camilla was notably absent, which Catherine took as either a very good or very bad sign.
"I've had several extensive conversations with Camilla about the concerns you raised," Charles began without preamble.
"I'm afraid the situation is more complicated than I initially hoped."
William leaned forward in his chair.
"What did she say when you presented Charlotte's accounts?"
Charles rubbed his temples in a gesture that suggested a developing headache.
"Initially, she was quite defensive.
She claimed that everything she said to Charlotte was meant as helpful guidance and that modern parenting perhaps doesn't prepare children adequately for the realities of royal life." Catherine felt her jaw tighten but forced herself to remain calm.
"Did you explain that we're talking about a 9-year-old child, not a young adult preparing for official duties?"
"I did. When I pressed her on the specific comments Charlotte reported, particularly about her appearance and behavior, Camilla became increasingly argumentative. She suggested that you and William are being oversensitive and that Charlotte needs to learn proper royal deportment if she's going to represent the family effectively in the future."
The room fell silent for a moment as the implications of this response settled in.
Catherine had hoped, perhaps naively, that once confronted with the impact of her words, Camilla might show remorse and agree to change her approach. Instead, it sounded as though she was doubling down on her behavior and questioning Catherine and William's parenting judgment. "Father, she's 9 years old," William repeated, his voice carrying a note of incredulous anger.
9.
She should be worried about her homework and which friends to play with, not about whether her natural personality meets royal standards. Charles nodded heavily.
"I made exactly that point."
Unfortunately, Camilla seems to believe that royal children need to start learning these expectations much earlier than previous generations did. She mentioned that in her view, Diana was too permissive with you boys, and that the result was unnecessary scandal and rebellion in your teenage years. Catherine felt something cold and sharp settle in her stomach. The mention of Diana in this context was not only inappropriate but revealed something deeply troubling about Camilla's motivations.
"She brought Diana into this discussion about Charlotte?" "I'm afraid so."
When I explained that Charlotte's confidence and natural spirit are qualities we should nurture rather than suppress, Camilla said that Diana had the same attitude, and look how that turned out. She suggested that being too indulgent with royal children leads to problems later. William's face had gone very pale, and Catherine could see him struggling to control his temper. The idea that Camilla was using his mother's memory to justify psychologically damaging his daughter was beyond inappropriate, it was cruel and calculated.
"Did you tell her that comparison was completely out of line?"
William asked, his voice dangerously quiet.
"I did.
In fact, I told her that under no circumstances should she ever make such comparisons again, and that Diana's parenting had nothing to do with the current situation. That's when our conversation became quite heated."
Catherine found herself almost holding her breath. "What happened then?"
Charles looked genuinely distressed as he continued. "Camilla accused me of taking your side against her without properly considering her perspective. She said she's only trying to help Charlotte avoid the pitfalls that come with being an undisciplined royal child, and that if I couldn't see the wisdom in that, perhaps I was too emotionally invested to judge the situation objectively.
She questioned your judgment as both a grandfather and a king? Catherine asked, astonished at the audacity. Essentially, yes.
She also suggested that Charlotte might be exaggerating or misremembering these conversations, and that children often misinterpret adult guidance as criticism when they're not accustomed to proper discipline. William stood up abruptly and began pacing toward the window. So she's not only refusing to acknowledge that her behavior is harmful, she's essentially calling Charlotte a liar and questioning our parenting abilities.
I'm afraid that's an accurate summary, Charles admitted.
When I told her that regardless of her intentions, the behavior needed to stop immediately, she became quite angry and accused me of letting you both manipulate me into attacking her character. Catherine felt her own anger building, but it was accompanied by something almost like relief. Camilla's response had revealed her true character so clearly that there could be no more ambiguity about her motivations or the appropriateness of her behavior.
What was your response to that? Catherine asked.
I told her that protecting Charlotte's emotional well-being was non-negotiable, and that if she couldn't interact with the children in a way that built them up rather than tore them down, her contact with them would need to be limited. Charles paused, looking older than Catherine had ever seen him.
She didn't take that well. How badly didn't she take it? William asked, turning back from the window.
She accused me of choosing my son's family over my wife, and suggested that this was exactly the kind of family drama she'd hoped to avoid by marrying into the royal family later in life. She said she was simply trying to prepare Charlotte for realities that you and Catherine were too idealistic to accept.
Catherine felt a surge of protectiveness that went beyond anything she'd experienced before.
The picture emerging was of someone who not only felt justified in psychologically manipulating a child but was angry at being called out for it. More disturbing still was Camilla's apparent belief that she knew better than Charlotte's own parents what was appropriate for their daughter.
Where do we stand now? Catherine asked directly.
Charles sighed deeply. I've made it clear that her interactions with Charlotte must change immediately. No more comments about her appearance, behavior, or personality. No more attempts to reshape her into some preconceived notion of royal propriety. Charlotte is to be treated with the same warmth and encouragement that any loving grandmother would show.
And if she can't or won't comply with those expectations? William asked.
Then, her contact with Charlotte will be supervised at all times, and, if necessary, limited to large family gatherings where others are always present. Charles looked directly at both of them. I want you to know that Charlotte's well-being comes first, regardless of any other considerations.
Catherine felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness.
Gratitude that Charles was ultimately prioritizing his granddaughter's welfare, but sadness that the situation had reached this point at all. The family dynamics would likely be strained for quite some time, and Charlotte would inevitably sense the tension even if she didn't understand its source.
How is Camilla handling these new boundaries? Catherine asked.
She's currently staying with friends while we both take some time to consider the situation, Charles said quietly. She feels that I've been unreasonable and that you've turned me against her. I've made it clear that my position is based on protecting Charlotte, not on any manipulation from you or William. The conversation continued for another hour, working out practical details for upcoming family events and establishing clear protocols for any interactions between Camilla and the children. Catherine found herself both impressed by Charles's willingness to set firm boundaries and saddened by the family upheaval this situation had created. As they prepared to leave, Catherine felt compelled to address one more concern. Your Majesty, I hope you know that we never wanted to create problems in your marriage. Our only goal was to protect Charlotte from treatment that was harming her. Charles nodded with genuine warmth.
I understand that completely. You did exactly what any good parent should do.
I only regret that it took me so long to see what was happening and address it properly. That evening, Catherine sat with Charlotte as she did her homework, watching her daughter's natural curiosity and enthusiasm as she worked through a history project about medieval castles. Seeing Charlotte animated and confident again reinforced Catherine's certainty that they had made the right choice, regardless of the family complications it had created. The road ahead would likely be challenging, but Charlotte's well-being was worth any amount of family tension or difficult conversations. Catherine had learned that protecting her children sometimes meant making hard choices that not everyone would understand or appreciate, but that knowledge only strengthened her resolve to always put her children's needs first. 2 weeks later, Catherine found herself preparing for the first major royal event since the confrontation with Charles and the establishment of new boundaries regarding Camilla's interactions with the children. The annual Trooping the Colors ceremony would be Charlotte's first test of how well the new arrangements would work in practice. Catherine had spent considerable time preparing Charlotte for the day, not with warnings or anxiety-inducing instructions, but with positive reinforcement about how proud she was of Charlotte's natural grace and confidence. The difference in her daughter's demeanor was remarkable. The anxious tension that had become so familiar was largely gone, replaced by the bright enthusiasm that had always been Charlotte's hallmark.
"Mummy, will Granny Camilla be riding in our carriage today?" Charlotte asked as Catherine helped her with her hair. "No, darling.
She'll be in a different carriage with Grandpa King. You'll be with me, Daddy, George, and Louis, just like always." Catherine kept her tone casual and matter-of-fact, though she was carefully watching Charlotte's reaction.
Charlotte nodded with obvious relief. "Good. I like it better when it's just our family together."
The morning proceeded smoothly until they arrived at Horse Guards Parade and Catherine caught sight of Camilla for the first time since the family confrontation. The Queen Consort looked composed but noticeably cooler than usual, offering only the most formal acknowledgments to Catherine and William. More tellingly, when Charlotte approached to give her traditional greeting, Camilla's response was perfunctory and distant. Catherine watched this interaction carefully, noting how Charlotte seemed to sense the change in atmosphere but appeared more curious than distressed. The absence of the usual subtle criticisms or corrective comments was clearly noticeable to Charlotte, even if she couldn't articulate exactly what felt different. During the ceremony itself, Catherine observed something that filled her with both pride and sadness. Charlotte was radiant, waving enthusiastically to the crowds, laughing at Louis's antics, and displaying the natural charm that had always made her such a beloved member of the royal family. But Catherine couldn't help noticing how Camilla's gaze followed Charlotte throughout the event, her expression unreadable but somehow calculating.
The real test came during the traditional family luncheon following the ceremony.
Catherine had agreed to this gathering with some trepidation, but Charles had assured them that he would be monitoring all interactions carefully. The dining room at Buckingham Palace buzzed with the usual post-event energy as family members shared their observations and experiences from the morning. Catherine noticed that Camilla positioned herself strategically at the opposite end of the table from Charlotte, though this could have been coincidental. More concerning was the way Camilla's attention seemed to drift toward Charlotte repeatedly throughout the meal, as though she was studying her behavior and looking for opportunities to comment. The moment Catherine had been dreading came when Charlotte accidentally knocked over her water glass while reaching for a bread roll. In the past, this might have prompted a sharp comment from Camilla about proper table manners or the need for more careful behavior in formal settings. Instead, there was only silence from that end of the table, though Catherine noticed Camilla's lips compress slightly in apparent disapproval. "No worries at all, sweetheart," Catherine said quickly, helping Charlotte clean up the small spill.
"These things happen to everyone."
William added with a grin, "I once spilled an entire bowl of soup during a state dinner when I was about your age.
Grandpa King still reminds me about it sometimes." Charlotte giggled, the moment passing without trauma or embarrassment.
But Catherine caught Camilla's eye across the table and saw something that sent a chill down her spine. The look was brief but unmistakably resentful, as though Camilla blamed Catherine for preventing her from using this minor incident as a teaching opportunity. After lunch, as the adults lingered over coffee and the children played in an adjacent room, Catherine found herself in an unexpected conversation with several other family members who had noticed the changed dynamics. "Camilla seems rather subdued today," remarked Princess Anne with characteristic directness.
"Everything all right?"
Catherine glanced toward William, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement.
"There have been some adjustments to how we handle interactions with the children.
We're all still finding our rhythm with the new arrangements." Anne's shrewd gaze suggested she understood there was more to the story, but she simply nodded.
"Children's well-being should always come first. Glad to see everyone's taking that seriously."
Later that afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Catherine witnessed an interaction that crystallized her understanding of how profound the changes had been. Charlotte approached King Charles to say goodbye, and he swept her up in one of his characteristic warm hugs. "Did you enjoy today, my dear?" he asked with genuine affection.
"Very much, Grandpa King.
It was so much fun, and I didn't feel nervous at all," Charlotte replied happily.
Charles's expression grew thoughtful at this comment. "You felt nervous at previous events?"
"Sometimes, but not today.
Today felt different.
Better."
Charlotte's innocent honesty clearly affected her grandfather deeply.
As they drove home, Catherine reflected on the complex emotions the day had stirred up. Relief that Charlotte was clearly feeling more secure and confident.
Satisfaction that the boundaries they had established were working effectively.
But also sadness that protecting their daughter had required such dramatic family upheaval.
"How do you think it went?"
William asked quietly, his voice carrying the same mixture of emotions Catherine was feeling.
"Charlotte was wonderful. Absolutely radiant and natural.
But I'm worried about the long-term implications of the situation with Camilla."
William nodded grimly. "Did you see the way she was watching Charlotte? It felt almost predatory. I noticed."
"I don't think she's accepted that her behavior was inappropriate. I think she's just biding her time until she can find a way around the restrictions we've put in place." They drove in thoughtful silence for a while before William spoke again.
"Whatever happens, we did the right thing.
Charlotte's happiness and confidence today prove that." That evening, as Catherine tucked Charlotte into bed, her daughter's questions confirmed her worst fears about Camilla's true feelings regarding the situation.
"Mummy, why didn't Granny Camilla talk to me very much today?"
Charlotte asked with the perceptive innocence that children often display. Catherine chose her words carefully. "Sometimes adults go through periods where they're thinking about things and might seem a bit quiet.
It doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong."
But she looked at me funny sometimes. Like she wanted to say something but wasn't allowed to." The accuracy of Charlotte's observation was both impressive and troubling. Even at 9 years old, Charlotte had picked up on the tension and resentment that Camilla was trying to conceal.
"How did that make you feel?" Catherine asked.
"A little uncomfortable, but mostly I just ignored it. I was having too much fun with everyone else to worry about it very much." Charlotte's resilience was remarkable, but Catherine made a mental note to continue monitoring the situation carefully. Over the following weeks, Catherine began to notice a pattern that confirmed her concerns about Camilla's true attitude toward the new boundaries. While Camilla was technically complying with the restrictions, not making overt criticisms of Charlotte's behavior or appearance, she was finding subtle ways to express her disapproval and resentment. The pointed silences when Charlotte was praised for her natural exuberance. The slightly raised eyebrows when Charlotte's laughter grew particularly animated during family gatherings. The way Camilla would direct conversations away from topics that excited Charlotte, effectively silencing her without actually telling her to be quiet. Most concerning of all were the comments Camilla began making to other family members within Charlotte's hearing. Observations about how different children had different energy levels, or how some families prioritized different values when it came to child-rearing. These weren't direct attacks on Charlotte, but they were clearly intended to plant seeds of doubt about whether Charlotte's natural personality was entirely appropriate for her royal role. Catherine realized that while they had successfully stopped the overt psychological abuse, they were now dealing with a more sophisticated form of manipulation. Camilla had simply adapted her tactics to work around the restrictions that had been placed on her behavior. The situation came to a head 3 months later during a private family dinner at Sandringham. Catherine had been watching Camilla's subtle campaign of undermining Charlotte's confidence with growing alarm, documenting incidents and discussing her concerns with William. But she wasn't prepared for what happened that evening when she finally reached her breaking point. Charlotte had been telling an animated story about a school project when Camilla interrupted with a comment about how some children needed to learn the difference between appropriate enthusiasm and showing off. The comment was delivered with a smile and directed toward the adults at the table, but its intent was unmistakable. Catherine felt something snap inside her. Months of watching her daughter navigate these subtle attacks, of seeing Charlotte's natural confidence slowly being eroded again despite all their protective efforts, finally pushed her past her limit. "Camilla," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation with surprising sharpness. "I need to speak with you privately. Now." The room fell silent, everyone sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the air. Camilla's expression shifted from surprise to wariness as she registered the steel in Catherine's voice. "Perhaps after dinner would be more appropriate," Camilla replied, attempting to maintain the appearance of normalcy. "No," Catherine said firmly, standing from her chair. "Now." What followed was a conversation that would reshape family dynamics permanently and establish once and for all that Catherine's role as a mother would always take precedence over royal protocol when it came to protecting her children from psychological harm.